friends, Rebecca here, the Dragon Librarian from Farmington Community Library, and Alderon and I are here today to talk to you about a book that we are just really excited about. It's actually the first book in a series, and it's a series that's super popular, so even if you haven't read it yet, you probably have heard of it. Now, despite it being super popular, I only started reading it recently, and that was because one of the book clubs I run, we were reading it for that group. So I thought, obviously, I better read it and see what all the fuss is about. And I was really surprised by how much I absolutely loved it. So why am I talking about a book that is already super popular? Well, the reason for that is because they just came out with the very first graphic novel based on the first book in the series. So I want to talk about both of those together, whether we think one is better than the other, and, you know, if they're worth your time, right? So what is this book? What is this book I'm super excited about? And that is Keepers of the Lost Cities. So Keeper of the Lost Cities is by Shannon Messenger. It is a very like I said, a very popular series. This is the very first book, which is just Keeper of the Lost Cities. There are right now, currently, I believe, 9 other books in the series. It gets a little confusing because there are some books when you get further in the series that are called like book 8.5 or book 7.5, and it's like an in-between story. So how many exact titles there are, I want to say there's 9 or 10 so far. But I cannot attest for the whole rest of the series. I only just finished book 2 very recently. But so far, I absolutely adore the series, and I think it's fantastic. So this is the very first one, Keeper of the Lost Cities. And like I said, the reason I want to talk about this is because there is a graphic novel that just came out, Keeper of the Lost Cities. Now, the thing to note about this is just part 1. So there's going to be 2 graphic novels that encapsulate the whole of the first book. So this is part 1, Keeper of the Lost Cities part 1. This is the only one that's out so far because this is a very thick book. And I'm just going to tell you, as you progress through the series, I've looked at all the books. They are longer and longer the farther you get into the series. Now, do not let that dissuade you. If you see the thickness of this and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't be reading that. That is too much involvement. You will fly through this book, I promise. The story is very catchy. It's very fun. It will keep you interested and on the edge of your seat, and you are not going to want to stop reading it. So it will blow by really fast. You're going to not even realize that it's as long as it is. When you get to the very end, you'll be like, oh, I'm finished already. I need to read more of this. So what is this story about? This story is about a girl named Sophie, who is 12 years old at the start of this book, and she's always been very different from her family. She is a telepath, which means she can read the thoughts of other people around her, and it's almost impossible for her to block these thoughts out. So just imagine that. Imagine you can hear what people are thinking, and you can't really block it out. Imagine how loud that would be being in your own home, just listening to your family and all their thoughts. It'd be like listening to everybody trying to talk at the same time, right? But then imagine what it would be like, say, in school with all those people and all those teachers and students talking at the same time. And you can't block that out. Or even just walking down the street or being in your town or in a big city. Wow, it's overwhelming, right? So that is what poor Sophie has had to deal with ever since she was a young kid and she started being able to hear these voices. So it's always kind of set her apart from her family, and she just feels very different from them. Until one day, she comes across this boy named Fitz, who tells her that she is actually not a part of the human world and she doesn't belong there at all. She is actually an elf. And no, I don't mean like an elf or a fairy from like Lord of the Rings. They are these beings with great power that have long lifespans. But even within them, Sophie is a little bit different because most elves have blue eyes and she has brown eyes. And that is a little bit unusual. And it's also unusual that she got her powers so early because most elves don't really reach what powers they have until about the age she is now. So even among the elves, she's very different. So Fitz tells her about all this. She ends up realizing that her family that she's lived with her whole life is not her real family. What? Oh my gosh. Why is she there? What happened to her? Why does she have these differences in her than the rest of the elves? And what is going to happen to her next? So obviously she goes back with Fitz to, to the elf world and starts you know, having to adjust to all that, which is really scary and hard. Like, imagine someone coming up to you and being like, oh, so guess what? The family that you've lived with your whole life is not really your family, and you're actually an elf, and I'm going to take you now to the elf kingdom. I think you'd be a little bit overwhelmed, right? That would be crazy for anyone to have to deal with. So Sophie is definitely going through a lot in this book. And then, of course, when she gets there, she realizes that there are all these mysteries and secrets that she has to try to unravel about not just the world she is now in, but about herself too. And what is going on with her powers, why is she different from everyone, and stuff like that. So, what I loved about this book, I loved how fast-paced it was. There was always something happening. There were a ton of characters in it that were fun to learn about and learn their personalities. And I hate making this comparison because I feel like a lot of books and media try to make this comparison to make it more popular, but I think in this instance it really works. So I'm going to compare this to Harry Potter in a very, very broad sense. Obviously the stories are very, very different, but this book reminded me a lot of Harry Potter in the whimsy that it portrayed. So the names of things in the elf world are very whimsical. Some of the powers and some of the things are just very silly and fun, kind of like how in Harry Potter a lot of that stuff is too. And there was just a general sense of fun and not taking itself too seriously, which I really, really enjoyed. Sometimes fantasy books are very serious, and there's definitely a lot of serious things that happen in this book, but it's just very fun and whimsical. I absolutely loved it. So, how does part 1 of the graphic novel hold up? So, first I want to talk about the things I loved about it. So, first of all, I really loved being able to see the characters that I read about in just drawn in real forms, right? So we've got Sophie and Fitz here as he's showing her, you know, part of this elf kingdom that she is now supposed to be a part of. And, you know, I loved being able to see these characters that I had grown to love being drawn out. Now, I thought the art was pretty good. I liked it quite a bit. It was very colorful, it was very fun, yet it kept to the story in a very realistic way, which I really appreciated. So I mentioned earlier that there are a lot of characters in this book, which, from what I've been told, continues to grow as the books progress through the series. So even that being said, there are a lot of characters in this book, particularly young elves that Sophie becomes friends with. And I sometimes mix them up a little bit. So it was really good in the graphic novel being able to see what they were all drawn like, and then I could be like, okay, this is Fitz, this is Dex, this is Keith, so on and so forth. These are the characters, and, you know, this is what they look like, and this is how they're drawn, and I can keep them a little bit, you know, categorized a little bit easier. I thought the graphic novel does a really great job explaining the story the way the book does. You know, sometimes graphic novels, it's really hard when they're based off of a book already to get the story right and make sure that they're communicating everything perfectly within the story. And I thought in this case they did a really good job. So, would I read this over the book? No, I think the book is better. And that's mostly just because the book obviously is way longer, has more detail, and I really love those details that make a book fully fleshed out. But that being said, I think this is really great. I think it's wonderful that if you already love the series, this is a wonderful addition to the catalog of Keeper of the Lost Cities books. But also, if you haven't read the book before, this might be a good starting point because it's a little bit more accessible in terms of the story's a little bit, you know, I don't want to say watered down, but there's not as much detail. So I think they would be really fun to read side by side, absolutely. So Keeper of the Lost Cities by Shannon Messenger. I'm sure we'll be talking about more of the books as I progress through the rest of the series. But definitely give this a try if you have not yet, and give the graphic novel a try as well. Well, that's what I've got for you guys today. I hope that this book and the graphic novel sound really awesome and that you want to give them a try. If so, please feel free to come check them out from Farmington Community Library. And also, thank you so very much for watching, friends, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.